In this first lesson, we're going to talk about IRAs. We're going to go over some of the history of these accounts and why they came into existence. We're going to tell you why custodians have restricted your ability to invest in what you want. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about self-directed IRAs and how they work, but we'll go into a little bit more detail on that subject in Lesson 2. Now, I won't go through the entire history of IRAs, but just to give an overview, there was actually a time when the only way that you could save for retirement in a tax-deferred account was if you actually had a pension. And the only way you could have a pension was if you worked for a company that offered one. Now, in 1974, Congress addressed this issue by creating individual retirement accounts, or IRAs. Now, these kinds of accounts could be opened by anyone, and as long as you earned income, you could make contributions to it. Now, technically, an IRA is a trust, and technically the custodian is the trustee. And so anytime the IRA engages in any transaction to buy, to sell, to loan money, distribute money, etc., anytime the IRA does anything at all, it is the trustee that actually facilitates or carries out that transaction. Now, you can see why if you wanted your IRA to buy stock in, let's say, like Apple computers, you couldn't do it yourself. You'd have to call your custodian, tell them which stock you wanted to buy, and then they're the ones that would actually carry out that transaction on behalf of your IRA. Now, there were a couple of problems with IRAs when they first were created. First of all, the contribution limit was only $1,500 per year, so you couldn't exactly put very much money into this account. Now, the second problem was the fact that the companies that met all of the federal requirements to be a custodian or a trustee were banks. And these banks had made a lot of money by recommending traditional investments to their clients and collecting referral fees for that. And so when they began offering IRAs, they restricted the IRA's ability to invest in anything but the stock market. Now, it was perfectly legal, of course, for an IRA to buy real estate or other non-traditional investments. But the banks would not let you invest in those things. Since they were the trustee of the IRA, they would simply refuse to facilitate any investment that was outside of the stock market. So here we have these trust accounts, these IRAs, that had been created by an act of Congress and that could, according to the law, invest in anything but life insurance and collectibles. But from the start, they were being hampered by these custodians. So this brings us to self-directed IRAs. Eventually, the law was changed so as to allow people to roll their pensions into their IRA. And all of a sudden, people started moving money from their pensions to their IRA, and some of these people had quite a bit of money to move. So for the first time, people began to have a lot of money in their IRA. Now, as these people felt the restrictions that the custodians placed on their accounts to keep them in the stock market, they began to look at the law. And they found that IRAs actually didn't have to invest just in the stock market. They found that IRAs could buy anything but life insurance and collectibles. Well, this was where the self-directed custodian was born. A self-directed custodian is no different than any other IRA custodian, except a self-directed custodian allows an IRA to invest in anything that is legal, and they don't sell investments to their clients. You want to buy real estate? Fine. You want to make a hard money loan to your neighbor? Also fine. A self-directed custodian will allow you to invest in anything you want so long as IRA law allows it. If it's legal, they will facilitate the investment. Now, an IRA that is held by a self-directed custodian is called a self-directed IRA. You can see now, can't you, that a self-directed IRA is actually no different than any other IRA. The only difference is that it's held by a custodian that will let you invest in what you want. So a traditional IRA with, let's say, Fidelity, for example, is no different than a traditional IRA with IRA Services Trust Company, which is the custodian that we use. Both IRAs are the same, and so are the custodians, but the self-directed custodian does not restrict what your IRA can invest in. So we've talked about what an IRA is and where it came from. We've described how some custodians limit an IRA's ability to invest. We've talked about how other custodians that don't place any restrictions on IRAs and how those are called self-directed custodians. Now let's give an example of how a non-traditional investment would work with a self-directed IRA. You may be familiar with how this works because you may actually have a self-directed IRA, but we're going to go through this because later on when we talk about how the checkbook IRA works, this example will come in handy and help you understand how it all fits together. In this example, we'll assume that you have a traditional IRA, and we'll also assume that the company that we use for all of our clients, IRA Services Trust Company, will assume that they're the self-directed custodian of your traditional IRA. Now let's say that you wanted to buy a rental house with your IRA money. Remember that it would be your IRA that is buying the property. So you would call the custodian, IRA Services, and you would tell them that you found a nice little 3-bedroom house that can be had for, let's say, $110,000. So how would this investment actually take place? Well, remember that an IRA is a trust and the custodian is the trustee. So whatever paperwork is involved in this deal, it's going to have to be reviewed and signed by the custodian or the trustee. You probably have some experience in real estate, so just think back to when you bought a property. Think of all the paperwork that was involved in that transaction. Now in this case, since the IRA is buying the house, the custodian would need to review and sign all these documents. They need to be sent to IRA Services, the custodian, to be processed, reviewed, approved, and signed. Now, it's also important to remember that the custodian would have to handle all the finances. Now, in the next lesson, we'll talk more about self-directed IRAs. We'll go through a few more examples of how you might do an investment in a self-directed IRA. And we'll review some of the reasons why, even though a self-directed IRA is an improvement over an IRA with a custodian that makes you stay in the stock market, that there are still some limitations that you need to understand, and we'll show you how a checkbook IRA is a big improvement on it. So we hope the information in this lesson has been helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to call us at 800-783-6409, and make sure to visit our website, checkbookira.com, to read more about the checkbook IRA.